Do we lose core competencies? Do we? Because many people think we do. So, for example, reliability. That's often what organizations complain about. Employees are not reliable anymore. They don't stick to their promises. On the other hand, of course, employees say the same. Organization promise a lot, but deliver, let's say, slightly less or little, or in worst case, nothing. And the question is, how can we do better? Because we all know we have to work together. However, when we keep going as we do right now, we are facing a serious problem. And I'm not talking about intergenerational problems. This is the part of it, but not the whole big picture we have to look at. When we look at reliability and other core competencies, we have to look at different factors because we're not here to complain. We're here to look how we can do it better. And the first aspect are the circumstances. So reliability does not mean 24/7 availability, to be very straightforward with that. Because if you want to have someone 24/7 available, first, it's not legal to do that in an employment scheme. It's not legal with employment contracts in most civilized countries. And it's also not legal from a point of view where you simply have to look into working laws of different countries, because normally they limit the amount of working that are allowed on a certain level. You can, of course, have people on a self-employed basis be available 24/7. That, of course, comes with a massive price tag, which most organizations are unwilling to pay or unable to pay. Of course, besides the fact of knowing that people are never available 24/7, you have to deliver excellent leadership. It's called reciprocity. I give you a very simple example. In one organization where I did consultancy, one of the leaders was very keen on people being on time. And I can truly feel that. As a born and bred Northern German, punctuality is something where we really struggle. Many people are unable to organize their days in a way that they show up on time. What I do not mean is, for example, when I give a public speech and you are late, we never had an agreement that you had to be on time. It's a public event. If you want to come late, that's your decision. I don't mean that if there's one meeting after another, which is, of course, not great, you are 2 or 3 minutes late. That's not great, but I can live with it if it doesn't happen all the time. What I really mean is people moving tasks, not completing them, and always telling me something else came in between, or simply not showing up at all, not telling us anything. If the leader doesn't live by the best example, you can and you cannot use your position as a leader to justify that. So when you say, oh, you as employees have to be on time and well organized, I as a leader, I am so busy. It's impossible to get through the day without delays. So you're canceling and moving left, right, and center. So the first aspect, you need to have great circumstances. If you don't have great circumstances, don't be surprised that people are not really willing to deliver the best of their promises towards you when you didn't do so in the first place. However, the second aspect is the aspect of personality and personal choices. That is the aspect where employees come in, or members of your staff can be employees, can be self-employed partners. And we have to get to what young people call real talk here. So we have to be straightforward. Very important is, if you do not want to have a career, you can communicate that. And let's be real about that. It can be very healthy for an organization to have people on board who do not want to have a career for a very simple reason. If I tell you every single person on your organizational level wants to have a career, my question is, how do you create so many jobs? How do you do that? And no one can answer that question, because it's very obvious that on operational level you have more jobs than on technical level, and jobs become even more scarce on strategic level. There's a reason why it's called organizational pyramid, not organizational block or organizational, I don't know, square, because that's not how anything works in an organization. The pyramid means less jobs to the top, and you need people who do excellent jobs, show up on time, maybe also leave on time, and they do exactly that for decades and decades to come, which is great, by the way. Work-life balance, however, has an impact on your career, and I can tell that to you from my own experience. When people talk to me, and when you're self-employed for quite a while on the market, sooner or later people will approach you in one way or the other, and they ask, why did it work? Why did it work, or why did it work reasonably well? If it did or not, you have to decide. However, a rising number of people contact me about what did I do in my self-employment and in the years before that. I worked in pharmaceuticals, I worked in IT, then became self-employed in the learning field. However, I can tell you that one of my secrets was outperforming people by experience, And surprise, surprise, there's a connection between the learning curve and the experience you get and the amount of hours you invest. If you say you only want to invest 35 hours a week, preferably from home or from anywhere else, not showing up in the office ever. And by the way, remote work is great. There's no problem with remote work. However, only remote work, of course, might make you the person who misses out on a certain kind of network or connection within the organization. There is a connection between the learning curve, the experience, and the amount of hours invested. And especially when I started out with my self-employment, I worked 60 hours plus per week. And to be fair, I still do. I like to do that because I like to do what I do. When you become self-employed, you should do something which you like, which you do not consider just a job or even a burden, because that's not how anything works or anything sustainable works. When you want to have a career, you have to decide if you're willing to give a certain share of your private life or of your hours off to the organization. Because if you do not, you can of course be a massive genius, which may or may not happen, but in the long run, hard work outperforms talent. In the long run, hard work always outperforms talent. And by the way, when you work in a team, you must be able to do so. I know it can be pretty annoying sometimes. However, reliability also means that you are able to work with other people. And if you now say, well, the expectations for reliability are just too high, when do we start to ask people for reliability? And I give you an example: showing up on time. That seems to be a pretty scarce talent. Meanwhile, unfortunately, as a born and bred Northern German, I can tell you I have issues with that. When you think, when do we expect people to show up on time, you get to the conclusion it's first grade at school. You're 6 years old, some of you 5 years old. People expect you to show up at a certain time in a certain room. And when you now say you are too stressed with being on time, or you just can't handle the pressure, just be honest that you probably are not in for a career. And by the way, if you're in for a career and you're not reliable, you're an entitlement thinker because you think you deserve to have a career without delivering on your promises. Reliability is a skill that we expect from people in elementary school, in primary school. And you can, of course, decide if you want to do that or not. It's perfectly fine when you say you don't. However, stop blaming your organizations or your employers on not offering you a career when you do not deliver on the promises. A proactive communication of values is something we all need. It's goal-oriented, it's result-oriented, it helps anyone in the room to see where you stand. When you say, I have a bit more focus on my private life, perfect. That's your right. And no one, by the way, no leader should complain about that. Never complain about people doing that. It's their choice. None of your business. However, when you as an employee say, well, my organization doesn't deliver a lot, of course, there are certain exceptions where people just are exploited or where you have bad leaders. However, many times people just expect way too much, way too quick, without delivering on the promise for quite a while, because that's what you have to do in the first place. The third aspect is the organization. You need a proactive design of culture, and I talked about that in one of my last podcasts already. When you want to have a great culture, that does not happen by coincidence. Just last week, I had a 2-day organizational strategy and culture workshop where a mid-sized company that tripled in size and now has a 2-digit amount of employees very proactively designs the culture to stay attractive in the competition. You can, of course, say, and now we have to see the organizational side, this happens all by coincidence, in your opinion. When you do that, you should not be surprised that people prefer to work somewhere else. Organizational culture is an asset. And I give you a very simple example. Let's say you're a mid-sized business, and probably you know the phrase, we cannot compete with the salaries that large corporations offer. And by the way, it's exactly the same in my company. I can never compete with any salary they offer. If someone says, I want to work for the large corporation, I don't even have to ask for the corporate salary offer. I will never be anywhere near matching it. It's a 20% gap minimum, if not worse. On the other hand, of course, you have to work for a large corporation. You are just someone completely replaceable. It's rather anonymous. It's pretty much follow orders in many cases, not always, but quite often you have to fit in. You have to blend into the organization that exists. While in mid-sized companies or small businesses, you can design your workspace, including that people take care, for example, of certain circumstances in your life. You get a special deal for this or a special deal for that. All that is possible in a small business. And that doesn't happen by coincidence. A proactive design of culture is important. Very important here for the organizational side. Stop making your problems other people's problems. And by the way, that's also valid for the employee side. When you as an employee, and we had that, Metro in the UK just published about that, when people say, I can't come to meetings at 8 a.m., my gym opens at 7, so I'm still in the gym at 8 a.m., then you shouldn't be surprised that you are sidelined with any kind of even the most basic career options, or sidelined by being picked for a job, a promotion, or an ongoing next contract. Because that is something that can basically be expected. At least if you want to have your gym at 8 a.m., have an agreement beforehand, before people agree meetings and then have to cancel them because you can't show up according to your private life circumstances, which they can take care of, but they don't have to. Of course, they want to, but communication is key. And very important for the organizational side, when you want to have top performers, it means you have to offer top conditions for the work. Stop making your problems other people's problems. And I give you the standard example. An organization tells me, oh, we need the top performers, the best people, the best of the very, very best. And then someone just inhales and then know what's coming. And they say, yeah, but our market is very challenging. It's a very conservative market. And I think change. We are on the frontier of change, and also, we are somewhere in the supply chain, so we can't pay very well. Well, when you can't pay very well, you probably get people who don't work very well. It's surprisingly, who could have thought, connected. So if you expect top performers, you have to compete with top conditions, not only in your industry, on the market in general. And if you can't compete with that, know your position in the market. However, stop making your industry's problems the problem of other people. No one is forced to work in your industry. And quite frankly, I am tired of hearing managers complaining about people who are too lazy just because they are unwilling to accept your subpar offers. You're below the standard, below the average offers. Do not attract anyone in today's market. And you know what's the least important thing? The least important thing is telling people, back in the days when I started out, then we had XYZ income and worked 800 hours per day. No one wants to listen to that. Of course, we respect people who did that, and it must be a hard time. When I started on the market at the end of the 90s, when I had my first employment, unemployment was roughly 10%. 2 out of 3 of my uni colleagues did not get a job in the industry they wanted to. I was lucky to be obviously, at least that's what they said, I worked well in the student job I had, and they took me over from a student job to a full-time role due to what they saw before in the pharmaceutical industry. Lucky me. And of course, that was dire. I do not want anyone to go through these times. However, you shouldn't be frustrated with them when the markets have shifted, and by the way, it's getting worse in the future. Of course, they demand more. We always stick. Anyone who's self-employed, and that includes me, always sticks to the market regulates itself. And by the way, employment and talent is part of that self-regulatory process, where when there's less talent on the market, prices go up, and we have to compete for talent. Very important now is you have to look into your management and look for, and I already talked about that a couple of weeks ago, the XY theory of Douglas McGregor. You have to see what kind of managers do you have. Do you have people, and now I talk about the why aspect, do you have people who think that people are genuinely motivated? If they are not, we've done something wrong. Because these are the managers and executives you can work with. They have a positive attitude towards people, and that is something that helps. If you have ex-managers, and I know how hard it can become, how hard it is not to become bitter and frustrated. However, if you become one of the ex-managers where you say, oh, everyone's lazy, no one wants to work anymore, all the young people are so entitled, it's just awful, they're all just a lazy bunch of people who just want the money and they're not delivering anything, then you are unsuitable for office. You are unsuitable to be a manager, you're unsuitable to be an executive, you're unsuitable to be a leader. Because when you bring in from the position of power, when you bring in the frustration in the first place, what do you expect as a result? Do you think that someone says, oh, thank you very much for talking down on me. I love to work for your organization. So many great people there. No. And the negativity spreads. It's called toxic spread. And the toxic spread works very quickly. So as a leader, you have to remain positive. I don't mean toxic positivity, but I mean a realistic positivity about when you offer something great, you most likely will find someone who works for a great organization if the offer is truly great. Getting back to the question, do we lose the basic skill, the basic core competency of reliability? No, we don't. It's just harder to find, and organizations now have to compete and try harder as the competition got a lot harder than it was compared a couple of years ago. And this, as a manager and executive, is your task to be successful in exactly that challenge. And I wish you all the best for that. And of course, now some people might think, hey, sorry, Lisa, I have a couple of comments on that. And that's fair. Or you have a question, maybe, or something that needs to be discussed. Feel free to contact me, nb@nb-networks.com. You find the description also in the show notes of this podcast, and my email is in there as well, including my LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me on there and text me there as well. So thank you very much, by the way, for the positive feedback of the last weeks. Very happy to hear that. And of course, we did some great rankings again, and we will publish them very soon. Thank you very much for all the positive feedback we received here. Very important as a second step, which I always recommend, is you come to our live sessions. To see when they happen, just register for the leadership letter when you go to expert.nb-networks.com. You can put your email address in there, and that means you only receive one email per week every Wednesday morning. It's 100% content at free guarantee. And then we take it from there. Every Wednesday, you receive an email with access to everything I've published. Also, you can see when the live sessions happen. And these live sessions then is something, they are, by the way, available in the English and German language. So feel free to visit both of them. In every Wednesday email, you will see when do they happen and at what time. Feel free to join at no charge for all listeners and readers. And the third aspect is the most important one, which I always give at the end. Apply what you heard in this podcast, because only when you apply what you've heard, you will see the positive aspect that you want to see in your organization, because there must be a reason you're listening to this podcast. And when you do, it means you have something on your mind that you want to positively change. I wish you all the best doing so. I'm available for help 24/7. Feel free to contact me anytime you like. And at the end of this podcast, there's only one thing left for me to say. Thank you very much for your time.